Hey folks, welcome back. It's been a while, but we need to get a video in so you can get the notes for the Constitutional Convention, the compromises that surround it, and the ratification process. Okay, so the Constitution, it is not just the intentions, original intentions to make a new constitution. They wanted to revise the Articles of Confederation and realized, yeah, we have to change it. So that's when they said we need to revise it by getting rid of it. And Alexander Hamilton is the in the Confederate Congress type of thing. He's the one who says we need to meet for the sole and express purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. And they do eventually meet in May of 1787. 12 of the 13 states do show up, and Rhode Island does not. And they are also the 13th state to ratify the Constitution out of the original 13. And it's not for a few years later. So this could be causing a problem later on. All right, so it is held in secret. 55 men total, not all at one time, but total, do show up. They are landowners, state convention, constitution writers, lawyers, men like that. So it's not just your everyday farmers. Some are, but again, they're still landowners. And then the other big important men that you need to know about who do show up, who have a major part. You have George Washington, Ben Franklin, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and Gouverneur Morris. And I tell you right there on the sheet as to what they are doing, but you need to remember who they are and why they are important. People who are not at the convention, you've got Patrick Henry. Thomas Jefferson is not there. John and Sam Adams are not there. And John Hancock is not there as well. Thomas Paine, nope, he's not there either. So all the people who were very influential in the Declaration of Independence or Revolutionary War era are not at this convention in Philadelphia. Also not represented would be the poor people, any slaves at all, and of course women. Women are still not represented um, in this situation. All right, one of the biggest compromises that they need to come up with, that they're struggling with, is small versus large states. All right, how are they going to be represented in this new legislative branch? And once the Constitutional Convention starts, many sides are drawn: slaves versus free, um, agrarian versus more of an industrial type of economy. But politically, small states versus large states, um, they kind of band together. So our large states, which are listed there, Pennsylvania, New York, Virginia, and Massachusetts, that means they are largely populated. Small states would be those who do not have as many people, and the other ones are listed there. Now, Rhode Island I have on that sheet, but again, they are not there. All right, but I want to explain that they are a small state. So I want you to take a moment and pause. And what do you think these two groups might want to make sure that they had in a new government so they could gain power? So put it on pause, jot down some thoughts. I have you a little box there. It says small states and large states, or the other way around. So make sure you do it and then restart the video so we can continue on with the notes. Welcome back. All right, so the large states. All right, we have this problem, large states versus small states, and we do come up with a great compromise. And it is amazing how we can really think about meeting the needs of two groups of people to build our government. So the great compromise is first we have the large states, and they are represented by Virginia. The Virginia Plan is created by Edmund Randolph and James Madison. It calls for three separate branches of government: legislative, judicial, and executive. And it, as I said, it does favor the large states in the legislative branch especially. And basically what it says is representation in Congress is going to be based on state population. The more people you have, the more representation in Congress you would gain. And Congress would have two houses. It would be a bicameral branch, and that would be the Senate and the Senate and the representative making up the legislative branch. Then they had the idea of the president and a judiciary both serving for 7 years. And the voters would then elect delegates to the House of Representatives. That would be the people's branch or people's house. And then other people, the Senate, would be chosen by state legislatures, those who are already involved in politics, basically. The small states are represented by New Jersey. They come up with the New Jersey plan. Mainly, the person in charge of this would be William Patterson. And this too calls for 3 separate branches of government: legislative, judicial, and executive. And as I said, it does favor small states, meaning those with the least amount of population, because it says there's only one house in Congress, and each state would have equal number of votes. So it's much like the Articles of Confederation, basically one state, one vote idea. And the executive branch for this plan would be made up of several people, and the state legislatures would be electing the members to the House. So the people would not have a lot of say in this one. You would vote for your own state legislature, and then the state legislature would vote for the House of Representatives. So it is a not as much participation by the people. And then we get Roger Sherman, who comes up with the great compromise. It's amazing. You have best of both worlds. And he is from Connecticut, so it's also known as the Connecticut Compromise. It calls for 3 separate branches of government, okay, executive, judicial, legislative. It does provide for one house to be based on population, and the other house was going to be based on the idea of equal number of votes. But he wanted to suggest that there would be 2 representatives per state, each with their own vote. So that would give them a little bit more say representing the people. And the president would hold a veto power, veto meaning I forbid. Basically, he does not like it. So he would hold the veto power, and he would be commander-in-chief, which would be up over the military. Okay, now continuing on with the Great Compromise. The main sticking point is resolved. Basically, how do we resolve the whole legislative branch issue? So they do have 2 houses in Congress, the Senate and House of Representatives. The House of Representatives would be based on population, so that represents the large states more so. They like this because the larger the population, the more representation they would have. And the Senate, it would really kind of be based on the small populated states, equal number of senators per state, 2, and each would get their own vote. And so that would be a huge win for small states. All right, some other compromises that you have worked on in class and that we are looking at here. The 3/5 compromise, basically slaves would count as 3/5 of a person, and slaves could, the South could count on the slaves towards the population, meaning not all of the slaves, but 3/5 of the slave population would count towards that state's population numbers, so they could then have more individuals in the House of Representatives. So you're asking, how do you do the 3/5 situation? That is basically, if you had 5,000 slaves, then you'd have 3,000 that would be added to your population. Very, very simple. The slave trade situation. The slave trade was going to end in America 20 years after the Constitution is completely ratified. All right, it is ratified in 1788. So therefore, the slave trade, taking slaves from Africa, bringing them into the New World or North America, would have to end in 1808. And it does. All right, then we have the presidential election compromise, where the state legislatures, which is voted on by the people, the state legislatures, would vote for an electoral college who chooses the president. All right, so the people are not involved in the election at this time. That changes with the 12th Amendment. All right, and that's in 1800. You quickly realize, yeah, this doesn't work. All right, so it was worse before than it is now. All right, and then they had the Commerce Compromise, where Congress would have the power to regulate trade with foreign countries, and that was huge because each state was making their own deals before under the Articles of Confederation. All right, so there's a chart. What I would like you to do is put this on pause and jot down the information from the chart. We will go over it in class. All right, so I wanted to give this to you so you can jot it down. So put it on pause, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, the end results of the Constitutional Convention. Basically, people were fearing a strong central government. They had a weak central government in the Articles of Confederation, but now they're like, this is going to be so too powerful. All right, but they realize that the three branches are going to be checking each other out. All right, so it's a system of checks and balances, and that really eases the fear of the main people who are worrying. But there's another piece that they are really struggling with, and that is an idea of a Bill of Rights. All right, and there are some people who refuse to sign this, specifically three who refuse to sign this when the convention ends. So 39 of the 55 who showed up actually do sign the document. As I said, 3 refused to sign. So that's 42. The other 13, they left and they never came back, and they really didn't have that much in with it. So they're like, forget it. So the convention does end in September 17th, 1787, and it is pushed out to the public. It required 9 states to approve or ratify this document for it to go into effect. And it takes a little while, all right? And I want to show you that chart in a little bit, but it does take a little while for them to finally ratify this document. As I said, it's in 1788. I think it's July. All right, so before I get any further, please, 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 please remind me in class to go over these 4 things. That way we can explain it, and it is going to be easier for you to work with me on it with me there, okay? All right, so the ratification process. Quite a few small states actually ratify this document pretty quickly. Delaware, New Jersey, Georgia, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Maryland, South Carolina. They really do it pretty quickly. Massachusetts, it's a fierce battle, and it barely adopts the document because you have to remember Shays' Rebellion was there just 8 months earlier, and they're really kind of cautious about this type of a document. They want to make sure that the atrocities of Shays' Rebellion do not occur again. We don't need another rebellion, even though Thomas Jefferson once said a little rebellion every now and then is a good thing. The last 4 states to ratify this Constitution. All right, so New Hampshire is the one that finally solidified the Constitution. So the last 4 states, Virginia, New York, North Carolina, and Rhode Island, they take their time. Basically, those 4 are by themselves until they ratify the Constitution, and Virginia and New York quickly come on to ratify it. But North Carolina and Rhode Island, they actually really battle with this in a lot of meetings in a constitutional convention of their own to really discuss it. And it does eventually become the supreme law of the land when New Hampshire takes it on. All right, so These are the final votes. It's on your notes as well, and I have all that information right there for you. So take it and run with it and just look at it. Note some of the closeness of these things. We'll discuss it a little bit more in class. All right, the ratification process. And it is basically just like everything else. Two groups emerge. So you have the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. And the Federalists want to make sure that they convince people to ratify this document. And they start to write a bunch of essays, a bunch of papers. It's called the Federalist Papers. And they go under different names to make sure that it's a little bit more anonymous. But we now know that it's John Jay, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton who were the individuals who wrote these papers. Now, the Anti-Federalist was the other side. They're not necessarily against the Constitution. They're just against the Constitution without a Bill of Rights. They want a Bill of Rights. And we have, papers that they submit as well as essays to explain why we should have a Constitution with a Bill of Rights protecting individuals' rights. So the Federalists, they do support the Constitution as is. They wanted a strong central government. They felt the Constitution limited the power of the national government just enough without a Bill of Rights, and they don't have to worry about those types of things with the way it's built. The national government would protect states from foreign nations. It would regulate trade. So they're all copacetic with this. They're like, this is great. It adequately guaranteed the rights of citizens in their mind. All right. Again, this is without all the Bill of Rights or any of the amendments. And currency would have stability at home and abroad because Congress had control of the trade and monetary things. So they're thinking this is great. Again, the three main supporters, the people who wrote the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay. The Anti-Federalists, they are opposed to the Constitution without a Bill of Rights. And they think that the federal government has way too much power, that the state governments would disappear. The document they felt needs a Bill of Rights because the rights of citizens would be in danger with this strong central government that has been created. They are very uncomfortable with Article 1, Section 8, which is the elastic clause, and said that the legislative branch has way too much power. They can do whatever they want, whenever they want. It's going to abuse power. It's going to be bad. All right, the Bill of Rights and the amendment process. All amendments to the Constitution would start with a constitutional convention requested by 2/3 of the states, and then there must be 2/3 of a vote of approval by Congress. The first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, were finally ratified in 1791, and we're going to be working on that on a worksheet, so you're going to take a chance and figure out the top 10 amendments and try to figure out what the order is, and that will be a big part of our midterm and our final later on this year.